So the magic is just a funny word that Michael has applied to it, because the magic is really just the nervous system. It's the organic intelligence within us. And so it's just our bodies. And when we can stay and build and develop a relationship between our mind and our body and our life, then security comes again.
Hello, I'm Eric Anderson. The voice you just heard belongs to Colleen McBride. She, along with Michael McLachlan, are the featured guests in episode 12, part 2 of YXC Underground. The emotional and physical trauma of cancer can be immense, but Colleen McBride is helping people recover from both through yoga. Her practice certainly helped Michael McLachlan, a cancer survivor who credits Colleen for helping not only his physical, but emotional recovery as well. Their conversation is featured in this episode of YXC Underground. I would not have met Colleen McBride if not for my co-host, who's sitting right next to me. We're in her backyard right now on a beautiful Friday afternoon, and that would be Amy Smith Morris. Hi, Amy.
Hey, Eric. How's it going?
Doing very well, thank you. Amy, can you tell me about how you first met Colleen?
So Colleen and I were actually co-workers. So we were both working at the Saskatchewan Cancer Agency, and we were both working on the pediatric oncology team. Yeah, so we both, I met her through that work.
Okay, so for people maybe that didn't hear the last episode, can you just quickly talk about what your role was working alongside Colleen, and then if you want to segue down the road?
Yeah, it's so great to be able to work on a team like that. So work on an interdisciplinary team with just all the different disciplines. But I was working as a pharmacist and Colleen as a social worker. And so we were both providing our own unique perspective based on our training and our experience to the children in Saskatoon that are receiving cancer treatment. So an example of that would be, like, lots of times these kids have to go through procedures and whatnot and, endure lots of pokes and prods and for me, I might use a drug to help them cope with anxiety or to sedate them. And Colleen might use different coping mechanisms that I'm sure she could tell you much more about than I can.
Is there, in the best, I guess, scenario, is it a bit of both that helps a child going through that?
Oh, without a doubt, right? And I say that about everything when it comes to healthcare and medicine, is that it's not all or nothing, right? You don't have to choose one side or another. It's really what works best for you and to use all the different resources you have to get you through it.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think for a lot of people, they're on one side of the fence and it can't be both. Right?
Natural. Yeah. No, cut that out though.
So, Amy, can you talk a little bit about how your relationship started to form with Colleen beyond a professional, I guess in a professional sense, but more of a personal way?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, I've been working with Colleen for some time, and when I was diagnosed, you have to step back and really think about whatever resources you have available to you. Whoever you know, you need to contact them, because that's your life on the line. So that's really what I was doing. And
when you say diagnosed, for people that maybe haven't heard the first part, what were you diagnosed with?
Yeah, sorry. So at the age of 30, I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. So I was working at the cancer agency, was working alongside Colleen on the pediatric oncology team. And I really just wanted to find anyone that could help me through that treatment and to survival and get to the other side. And when I thought about my health, I thought about my physical health, of course, being surgery and chemo and physical therapy, things like that. But I also thought about my mental health and how I was going to go through cancer treatment and then return to working with people with cancer. And so when I thought about my mental health and a social worker that could help me, the first person that came to mind was Colleen.
What makes her a good social worker?
Oh gosh, that's a hard question. Colleen is she's really approachable. She's really reflective. And you'll probably hear that in her interview too, is when I'm asked a question, I just start to answer right away. And Colleen will actually sit and think and reflect and then give you the next piece or the next thought that she has.
You know what? That's a very good point, because you'll hear those pauses in the interview coming up, and sometimes as a journalist, pauses can scare me a bit, because it's like you want to keep the conversation flowing, but then you sort of learn to embrace it. It's like, no, she's, like you said, she's just thinking, and then she gives a wonderful answer.
Exactly, and it makes it so much richer than you thought it would be.
So just to set the scene for everybody, Colleen and Amy and I had been sort of messaging one another back and forth for a few months, and we finally found a day that worked for me to meet up with Colleen. And so I actually went to her house, and she has a yoga studio in her basement. But and I'm so glad she thought of this. She asked one of her old clients, a gentleman named Michael McLachlan, who was diagnosed with cancer, and relied on Colleen not only for her social work, but the yoga classes as well. She invited Michael to be a part of the interview as well. So the three of us were down in her beautiful little yoga studio in her basement, and we had this conversation that just went in all these wonderful ways. And I'm so glad you mentioned that she's reflective, because I think having Michael there retell some of his story, you could see that Colleen was reflecting on that.
Yeah, I like how it's true. Colleen's a social worker, she's a yoga instructor, and she uses those two together. But when you listen to this interview, you expect her to be talking about yoga, but you realize, yes, it is about yoga, but it's actually not about yoga at all.
Yeah, there's so many different strands and themes, which is why too we wanted this interview to have its own episode, because there's a lot to take in. So I first started by asking Michael if he would share a little bit of his story, and here's what he said.
Well, I had Non-Hodgkin's Burkitt's lymphoma, and the tumor was in the central nervous system in the base of my spine. So I went through emergency surgery, and timelines are a blur, but it was sometime after that the diagnosis came down, and I started chemo the very next day. So it was pretty intense and very evasive, if you will. Here I am. It was a 6-month journey through treatments and life-changing experience.
Well, how long ago was that?
I was diagnosed, or I had my surgery on the 16th of September 2016.
So that's not that long ago. Because it was so invasive and things had to be done quick, what was that experience like when you were in the midst of it?
Well, it's a good question. I'm still wrestling with that. Everything happens very fast. Once, as an example, the surgery, I knew I needed help. So, I was going to take that lifeboat, no questions asked. And afterwards, when they did know the type of cancer that I had, there's certain things that I remember crystal clear, and one of them was meeting with the oncologists, and I said, okay, well, I have 4 sons, and I'll discuss it with them, come back and see me tomorrow. And they said, no, you got 1 hour. So it was a pretty quick decision, and it was the right one. So it was a vortex. It was a funnel of insaneness that was taking place around you, and then you have to get caught up with it. The person going through it has to get caught up with it, right? Everything takes place. Within the day, I had 5 procedures, and I started chemo right away because my form of cancer can double in size in less than 18 hours. So the nice thing about that, if you will, the positive side about that is that it can be cured because it's so rapid. Now, the flip side of that is the treatment for it is equally as aggressive as what the cancer itself is. So, there's always 2 sides to it. But anyway, so it took me a while. It actually, there's a nurse up there on the 6th floor that one particular day had a very serious conversation with me, one-sided, if you will. And she got me in the game. She got me into get my head into it and understand that I do actually have cancer and that I need to start fighting. So what can I say? I'm alive because the system worked pretty well flawlessly for me. The people were amazing. You turn your life over, you're naked to 100 people. And you put your trust in them and you do what you have to do. The deal that I made with, if I can say names, Dr. Awesome, who was awesome, and that's his name, is Awesome. I knew we were going to get along fine when he introduced himself. Was, quite simply, I was going to do my part to stay alive, while his part and the medical part was to bring me as close to death as possible to kill the cancer. And so they did their part and I did my part, and away we go, picking up the pieces now.
I feel like we could do a whole podcast episode on just what you told me. Like that's so, Colleen. When you're hearing Michael tell that story, what's going through your head?
So Michael's story is definitely unique because every person's experience has their own threads to it. I think the part that I'm always struck by is that fight to live. And then the question in my mind is, what is it that we're living for? And why are we fighting? And why is it important? And then I think about that the medical team, although they have a lot of, although that I think about the medical team and how they focus on treating the cancer. And sometimes there's a possibility for cure, which is the case in Michael's situation, but that's sometimes cure is an option and sometimes it isn't. But healing is always available to us. And regardless of the situation we're in or going through, there's still something about that that's living, right? So whatever we're in, we're living in it. And so how do we do that? And how do we experience that? And how do we say that was my part of my story?
So in Michael's story then, at what point do you two meet then? And I know you met before, but in terms...
Post, near the end of treatment. So at the Cancer Agency, my experience is that every patient has access to their team, right? And their team includes medical doctor, like an oncologist, the nursing staff, pharmacy staff, dietitian, and social work. So sometimes that's one or more of those different disciplines. So I was consulted. I received a referral from Michael's social worker to do some kind of teamwork, I guess, like the three of us met, because I have extra training in trauma. And so I think that was how I don't really remember when. I think you were done treatment?
Yeah, I was finished treatment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know you during treatment.
No.
Yeah. And so I think it was, if I remember correctly, it was about now treatment's done and what has happened to me.
Yeah.
Right? So I made it. They did what they said they were going to do. I did what I said I was going to do. And now what? That's what I recall.
So then how... Yeah. So then what are those steps like then? Like how do you approach it, Colleen? How do you approach those steps in terms of now what?
Well, I think it's about letting our life energy and our life force come back into relationship with us. And that's a process, and that's tricky to do when we feel like we've been threatened, right? Or we feel like we've been unsafe. And the reason that's tricky is because it's innate in us to protect. right? That's our nervous system. We go into fight, flight, freeze whenever we feel threatened. Everyone has a nervous system. Everyone does it. Most of the time in our life, we're able to manage that. So we have coping skills. We know how to take a deep breath. We know how to talk to our friends, our family. We know how to, but we have our tools to manage those instincts that are kind of there. But sometimes trauma is anything that happens that we don't want, can be anything that happens that we don't want, or happens too soon and too fast that we don't understand. We don't have time to make sense of what's going on. Medical trauma is kind of an interesting little monkey of its own, because I often use something a bit more less triggering, like say like a broken bone, right? If I was to break my bone on my arm and need it to be set and pinned, I'm going to say yes, because I want to be able to use my arm, right? So I'm going to sign that consent, right? So the doctor's going to say this is what needs to happen, but you have to sign, right? And I'm going to say yes. But the fact is, my body doesn't actually, the cells in my body don't actually want to go through that procedure, right? It's invasive. It's a boundary rupture to my body. So it's not conscious that we're doing it, but oftentimes what happens is we kind of just disconnect a bit, right? From that. And that's just the nervous system. That's just self-protection. And that's why we all continue to get to do what we do in our days.
Well, exactly, and I think that's what brought us together the first time. It was in November. I remember specifics, 2:00 at night, because I looked at the clock and there was some snow coming down. I was on the 6th floor overlooking the river. I was on all fours actually on the bed, and I was having a conversation with myself, and the conversation was quite simple, that my mind couldn't take what was happening. So I made a separation between my body and my mind, because I knew my body would be strong enough to take whatever it had to take, but upstairs I couldn't do it. So I made a disconnect, and then I couldn't reconnect afterwards. That's lingering, and it all to certain degrees. There's an acceptance because you have a new body now. I mean, you've been cut open, there's damage done to your spine from the tumor, and on and on and on. Like the nervous system, I have a new nervous system, I have a new walk. So I wasn't reconnecting. I wasn't putting the pieces back together, and I think that's how we come in. As an example, nobody could touch my back. I wouldn't let anybody touch my back. It's you can't see it. Number one, it's behind you. Number two, there was, if I can say, a shitstorm that went on in it, and I wasn't at peace with it. I wasn't one with it. So the trauma therapy was to help me put that back together. And I'll never forget the whole thing. And I don't know if you recall, but at one particular stage where you were doing your magic, and then we were quiet, and then I made a joke, and it was kind of a complete circle, I believe is what you called it. I touched it, faced it, dealt with it, and then let it go. And I did feel this release, like, oh, man. And I don't know what I said, but it was funny.
Everything you say is funny. Yeah.
So what's the magic? And then you're smiling now, but what's the magic, and how does yoga work into that?
Yeah. So the magic is just a funny word that Michael has applied to it, because the magic is really just the nervous system. It's the organic intelligence within us. And so it's just our bodies. And when we can stay and build and develop a relationship between our mind and our body and our life, then the security comes again.
But like Michael just said, and it's a really, like, it's a visual way how you put it in terms of you have this disconnect between your mind and your body. And even though your body's strong enough that you know that it can withstand it, it's been through, like you said, a shitstorm, and it's disconnected. So how do you, Colleen, reconnect?
So the language of through the nervous system, the fight, flight, freeze, to help it to feel secure. The language of the nervous system is sensation, right? So the language of the mind is words, right? Well, that's why we have this like constant chatter that goes on in our heads, and we like to tell stories, and right? That's how the mind communicates. The nervous system communicates through sensation. When you've been in a position, for many people, when we've been in a position where we feel like our body has betrayed us by becoming sick when you haven't done anything, right? Just like any time that a person has been betrayed, there's kind of like, you can't trust you, right? So I'm going to disconnect. And so then the reconnection would be the same process as anything else. If you need to reconnect, if you need to repair a bond, right? You just have to go at it slowly and step by step and learn its language and see what's in there that's meaningful to you, right? And that has to come from each person themselves. Somebody else I can't offer meaning to someone else, and I don't want someone else offering meaning to my learning curves, right? It's really magical when it comes from within. So the yoga.
Yes, yeah, keep going.
Yeah.
I just have so many questions. Yeah. You keep going.
So I'm a registered yoga teacher, and I guess through my own experience with yoga was the experience of that this body that I live in actually is here to be my friend, right? And that I can work with it and it can work with me, and we're not against each other. And it's not just this, yeah. So that was something that I gained through my own experience in yoga, I think that's separate. And then through kind of my professional training was always this interesting curiosity about how healing actually happens. The early part of my career, I was a mental health counselor, and there's lots of different modalities. At the time that I was there, CBT was really kind of getting a lot of encouragement to use that, because we could kind of see more patients and see people quicker, and it worked well with the system. But I found like that for most people, it was kind of a little bit of a Band-Aid. And so I often wondered what else was going on. So then when I took somatic experiencing and became a practitioner then I thought, this is really interesting, because now between this and yoga's pretty popular. Most people have some level of comfort or understanding at this point, right? 2019, 2018, with a yoga studio. And I just thought this is a great opportunity to blend a few things and actually do my best to offer a way for people to meet people where they're at and let them have a space and time to meet themselves, where hopefully there's some space that I'm holding for them. And I bring with me, in developing the program, there's a lot of research that was put into it. We know that fatigue is one of the most common side effects of people who have been through cancer treatment. So fatigue is an interesting experience, because you need a certain amount of rest, but rest alone isn't really the answer, right? You need some kind of activity, but intense activity will drain you too quickly. So yoga is one activity that seems to be supportive to fatigue. It also addressed other things that showed up in the research around the importance of safety and social connection, and just the ability to come back into relationship with self in a safe place, I guess. And then I was able to, it was a good blend or a good match as well with the nervous system and the SE.
You were listening to part 2 of episode 12 of YXC Underground. My name is Eric Anderson, and I'm joined by the wonderful Amy Smith-Morris. You can subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. You can also stream episodes on Spotify and on the website at yxcunderground.com. We have been listening to a conversation with Colleen McBride and Michael McLachlan. There's a lot to talk about so far, Amy, but the one thing I wanted to ask you was that physical and emotional connection that Michael touched on near the end. When you were undergoing treatments, did you ever experience that disconnect between your mind and your body?
I think I still do when I think about treatments, like reflect back on treatments. Definitely there were points throughout my treatment where I know I physically had a conversation with someone, but I actually don't recall doing that. And if that's not a disconnect between your body and mind, I don't know what is.
Why do you think that happened to you?
I think a lot of it's protective, probably. Your body knows it's enduring so much and so much trauma that it's actually doing its best to protect you from that.
So if it's not too prying to ask, when you were going through those times, did you feel comfortable to tell Colleen that? And if so, how do you work through something like that?
I don't even know if I realized it when I was going through it. Like when you're going through treatment, I almost say it's easier than after treatment in a sense. And the reason why I say that is because you have this plan. You know you're going to do surgery, or you're going to do radiation, or you're going to do this many cycles of chemo. So you have this very clear plan of how you need to march forward. And then once you're done and you're cancer-free, hopefully, or wherever your treatment takes you, then you're kind of just like, now go back out into the world. And so you're kind of like, well, what do I do now to recover? What do I do now to heal? What's the plan now? And so that's kind of the difficult part.
How did you deal with that difficult part when you were done the plan?
Yeah.
How do you go? What were some of the first things that you did?
Yeah, I think all through my treatment, I was meeting with Colleen regularly. I often call them just my brain tune-ups because I think it's just as important as getting the rest of your body tuned up. So I would meet with Colleen regularly. And then after treatment, it was a lot of work on anxiety and trauma and things like that, which Michael talks about too, to kind of recover and bring you back to a sense of well-being.
I'm glad you mentioned the anxiety because we do hear that from Michael, and I think we'll hear it more in this second part. And when we pick it up here, I was asking Michael about what it was like to take the first few yoga classes with Colleen, and I'm so glad you mentioned too off the top, like it's yoga. There's a physical aspect, but it's so much more than that. And so I think you'll hear that in this part of the interview. So let's get right to it.
Yeah, what were they like? Tearful. Safe. Of course, peaceful. Place of peace. And non-judgment. Understanding with other people that were there. And yeah, I guess you didn't have to look over your shoulder to see if somebody's coming to do something to you. I know it's hard to describe.
You mentioned safe and other people there. The fact that there were other people there who, is it safe to say, shared experiences? Like I know not specific to you, but kind of going through similar things. Did that help?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I guess that's the thing, like cancer is a big word, and there's so many different forms of it, and they all have their unique challenges, and so did the people, because everybody has different mindsets, everybody has different experiences, so everybody has a different way to approach it. The one thing about it is that when you're diagnosed with cancer, you have two choices. And I don't even know if they're choices. You have to go through it. Now, if you don't go through it, it's going to send you down a different path. So you're still going through it to some sense. So that's the commonality, right? If there's surgery involved, it's the same thing. Nobody volunteers willingly, you know. I had a conversation with my brother once who thought that was pretty amazing. You know, I get spinal taps, right? They take spinal fluid out and then they put chemotherapy directly into your spine so that it can go into your fluid around your brain, if you will, because your traditional chemo through your vascular system doesn't work there. So, and he says, you know, he was amazed that I could voluntarily, you know, lie on the side of the bed while the doctor does his thing. And I was thinking about that, and I said, no, well, I'm not really volunteering for that, but it's got to be done. So I come up with this great idea. I'm sorry I'm rambling and I'm getting sidetracked. I'm come up with this idea where I'm not going to take any Ativan. I'm going to do it, you know, without any medication and just volunteer to have that procedure done. Anyway, thank goodness Awesome was smart enough to say, well, you know, every time your muscles move, it makes my job harder. So that's how far that went. It was a mental exercise that went nowhere. But so anyway, to be in a room with other people, you know, and everybody's at a different level. There was people there that were spending their final days on this planet, and they were there for, you know, their journey. But I think it was also, you know, the strength in numbers. There's also, you want to give encouragement, you know. You want to show to other people that you can do this. you can get through this. There's better times ahead. And so I think that was, I hope that was a common experience for everybody. But the yoga program itself is, I think, completely unique. I go to yoga. I just come back from Vancouver, and they're on every street corner. And a plug for men, get out. There's lots out there that do. There's not enough in Saskatchewan that do. But anyway, you know, it was, you asked me, I guess, what my first experiences were like. My first experiences were the same throughout all the time that I went. So it was like, it wasn't the first, it was just, it was a continual growth for me. And it was a reconnect of the brain and the body. After we'd met at the cancer center the first time, I think if memory serves me correct, it was like on a Thursday. Not that I'm remembering dates. But that Saturday, I was not feeling well and had a bad cough, and so, you know, you've got these rules that you have to follow. So I went to a GP, walk-in clinic, had x-rays done, and was informed that there was a possible mass on my right lung and that I have to report to the cancer center Monday morning. So all the work that was done on the previous work was out the window come Monday morning. But anyway, it turned out to be nothing. And so the yoga program was kind of a restart to that. But I'd already touched it and felt it. So I knew what that was like. So going back to getting into the yoga, which was the very first program he offered, was a great way to reconnect. You know, and I don't want to tell other people's stories there, but we would talk before and we would talk afterwards. And you know, it was amazing, simply. And you know, I become a big advocate of it. And you know, I want it to be a must. You know, I mean, the medical profession is, for me, was flawless in doing what they had to do, and they did it well. But then there's the after side, and the medical profession doesn't deal with that. So it's programs such as this that do. And it's, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be thinking the way that I'm thinking. I wouldn't be, you know, I don't know. It just, because it just, you know, as a father of four, mind you, they're all young men, you know, it affects everybody. You know, if my parents were alive, as an example, there'd be 75 people in their family. I was the second person to be diagnosed with cancer. Since then, there's been one other who's finished her treatments and everything, and it's looking good. So there's a ripple effect that goes out, right? And, some people would say it's not supposed to happen to your baby brother.
Thank you for sharing that. And there was something that I found really interesting that I wanted to pick up on you. So when I go to yoga classes, and I've been going to yoga for about maybe 4 or 5 years off and on, and the classes I go to, it's very much, no matter what your level is in terms of if you can stand on your head or if you can barely touch your toes or your shins in my case, it doesn't matter. Everyone's at their own pace. But then Michael just said, everyone in your class is at their own stage in their journey in terms of like you're recovering and you're starting that road, and then you might have a person who, like you said, it's their last days on earth. And so I'm wondering, as an instructor, Colleen, how do you go about teaching so that like there's so the cross section of people that's incredible. How do you go about teaching that when you're in the actual studio?
That's an important question, because it looks a lot like a yoga class. If anyone walked in, we'd all be on our mats. We'd all be in, the posture that's right for our body. Or sitting in a chair. I think that the part that really drove the planning and the organizing of this program for me was a lot to do with my education. When I was doing my master's, I did it in palliative care and end of life. And in that process, I learned a lot about the disease process from the point of receiving a diagnosis to whatever the whole path of that. And so I think that's the part that really provided me personally the part that what I needed as a professional social worker and a yoga teacher, to be able to hold that space and understand that although there was a common diagnosis with all these people, that I was able to understand a bit more of that everyone was on it in their own place, I guess. So the same as a yoga teacher would be able to do in a class that that you go to, right? So whether someone's standing on their heads or touching their shin, So I think, but the part with for me with working with people who have cancer is understanding that process and the trajectory of that experience, and how what it's like to come into it, and where kind of the exits, whether a person exits it where treatment is complete and cure is there, and right then there's the aftercare recovery, or whether cancer is whether it becomes a chronic condition, right? Which sometimes that is the case, and it's a ongoing needs ongoing treatment or care at different times. And then for other people, sometimes cancer is the part that is their story of end of life. So if I think about, as a yoga teacher, the yamas and the niyamas, inclusion, right, and community and safety, and having a relationship with ourselves and others was really what was the yoga foundation to it. The other parts were around things that I know as a social worker and that I've studied, and then the other parts are around trauma, which I've also been working to learn more about and kind of break down hopefully some barriers why people are bumping up against things that they're not able to heal or get past because we're not actually tending to what needs to be tended to. Michael had said something about, and it made me think about autonomy, right? That when you're in a situation where you have a lot of medical intervention happening. I think it seems to me from the stories I've heard and the things that I've witnessed is that there's a sense of autonomy that's lost. And so that opportunity to gain that back again, right? Where are my edges? Where are my boundaries? Where do I begin? Where do I end? How do I exist now, right? Were important parts as well.
I have a logistical question for you. In terms of your classes, Colleen, do you know where everyone's at before they come into the class? Like, do you know do you know their story basically before they come and you start the practice?
So the lens that I see the world in is that of relationship. So my hope is to know that. I think given my experience, there's some things that I'm able to make some educated guesses about. But I also think that there's a respect that it's about forming the relationship and that I want them to trust me. So when they're ready to tell me, I'm ready to listen. But that's their choice, because going through an experience like cancer, there isn't a lot of choice. So the truth is, yes, for every person in the program, I've known, but there isn't a registration form or there isn't an exit survey, or right, I'm just really more of, I want to know you, I want you to feel safe with me, and I want to respect the process of that. And so when you're ready, and if this feels right for you to share that, I'll hear it, but I don't want to rupture those boundaries as people are trying to put them back in place.
I think I can't thank you enough, both of you, for being so open and for sharing so much. And I'm just thinking and sort of reflecting back on what we've been talking about and the themes of safety. And I'm so glad you mentioned autonomy. I think that's been sort of a running theme. And it seems like with this program, with doing yoga, but it's so much more, that autonomy and safety sort of come back into your life. Michael, would that be a fair assessment?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's it's all part of the process, and it's a very safe environment, and everybody gets to that stage at a certain time, so there's no pressure to, and it's just a natural flow, right? Yeah.
Just like a vinyasa flow kind of.
Just like a vinyasa flow. And hopefully to come back into the world and see that the truth of the matter, regardless of what we saw in the news or regardless of the terrifying experience we just had, the world really is mostly safe. And we as human beings are designed for connection. We're not made to be in isolation, and that's just not how we're designed, right? So I think that's the other piece, is that I hope that as the fog lifts or as the paths change or the people come around different bends, they're able to look out their windows or go to the grocery store or say hi to someone and know that really at the end, like, it's really, the world is safe and people are good. And so
when we talk about safe, it's for me, it was more of it was a safe environment where nobody's going to be doing anything to my physical being. And it was a safe environment for me to process what had happened and where I'm at in this process, and to find peace and acceptance of a new life. See, one thing that people, I don't think, talk about, maybe they do, I don't want to generalize, but when you get diagnosed with cancer, everything changes. And and of course everybody's different, but for me, I'll speak for myself, everything changes. It's a brand new life. There's nothing that's the same. There's things that are more solidified in your ethos, in the way that you think, and there's other things that are totally meaningless and irrelevant and you'll never touch base with again. So that's in your spiritual being, if you will. In the physical, that's a whole other thing, right? Everybody, if there's physical damage caused by surgeries or things have been taken off your body, you have to deal with that. It's new. And so it's a process to come to grips with that. You wake up one morning and the next day when you wake up or whenever it is, you're not walking right. Things have changed. So the yoga, and when I speak of safe, it's a safe environment to find the acceptance and to move through that process and to move on in life, because you're with other people that are experiences the same thing, and everybody to a different degree, right? I mean, I'm grateful because I can control my bladder, I can walk, and I am alive. So what do you do with all of it? You go to yoga, Colleen's yoga, and experience that and put the pieces together. Yeah.
Is it humbling to hear that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's humbling, it's honoring, it reminds me of that position really carries a lot of responsibility, and it needs to be done with a huge amount of integrity, because healing happens when people are seen, heard, and understood. But you can't join. You're not helpful if you. It's like I often use the example. You can't join. You don't. It's not helpful to join in. That's their experience, right? So it's kind of like a lifeguard, so to speak, right? The last thing you want to do is enter the pool with the person that's struggling, right? Because you want to stay on the edge. You want to offer them support. You want to be there, remind them they're okay, get them what they need, and help them to the edge so they can help themselves out, right? I think I don't have anything that someone needs. Everyone has in them what they already need, right? But there's a lot of responsibility in respecting that and remembering that I need to check my stuff at the door and show up as a human being, hopefully with some skills and some knowledge that are helpful to
Very
others.
good point. And thanks for I don't want to be putting all the pressure on you. It's the opportunity to go within yourself, if you so choose to find your way through it. And what Colleen does is provides you the environment, the safety, the security, the expertise within herself to, work it out for yourself, navigate your own way through it. There's, I can think of one particular person that maybe wasn't ready, but it was still part of a healing process for her because she got to vent, and that was important. And I figured, maybe today she's doing a whole lot better because you have to be heard. The responsibility doesn't lie with Colleen. It lies within each and every one of us. And the caregivers and the support people that are around you have to understand that too. I think back to the beautiful couple who's, they were seniors and his wife was gone through treatments and everything was good, and they got the diagnosis that, cancer is all gone. Anyway, one particular session, she was ill and couldn't come. And so her husband asked, "Is it okay if I come?" And I thought, there you go, perfect. It's not only for the people that go through it, but everybody goes through it. I mean, he went through his own trauma watching his loved one have to go through it. So it affects him, but he found the same thing for him to be able to deal with that. And I thought that was just, it was one of those moments where it was a yes moment. Yeah, he's doing it.
So one of the parts of this program is that it's for patients and caregivers. Caregivers often are kind of on the side, giving in and putting a lot of energy and doing a lot of selfless love without the support that they need to be able to do that for a long period of time. So caregivers are always welcome as well. And then it's their opportunity to have a chance to just check in with themselves and be in a space where I then can make sure that their loved one is being watched and cared for so they can rest. I know there was times, I think, where sometimes the caregivers come, or sometimes even people who have cancer come and they're like, I just slept. I'm like, well, I'm glad you had a good sleep, right? Like that counts. Like to me, that check mark, that counts, right? It's not about doing it perfect or right. It's about the opportunity to have some space and time with yourself and be with someone who are a group of people who hopefully have an ability to hold space as well as a heart to care.
I think that's really nice. I think that's almost like that's a really nice way to end it, kind of deal, because it paints a really nice picture of what that environment's like when you walk into the studio. I'm very, very thankful that I got to meet both of you, and I'm glad we did this together. And for those of you that are hearing this right now, it was fascinating watching you guys, your eye contact back and forth, and you can tell you were sort of building off of things, and so I really appreciate that, because it takes guts to talk about, for Michael to tell your story, and then for Colleen to not only share your story, but then to share your observations in terms of what you see and how you feel. So thank you guys so much. I sure appreciate this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My thanks to Colleen and Michael for sharing so much in this conversation. It's certainly not easy to lay everything out the way that they did, so I really appreciate them taking the time to talk and appear on this podcast. And I want to let people know where they can find Colleen and her yoga practice. So if this is something that interests you, she will be running cancer care informed yoga classes at the Saskatoon Naturopathic Medicine Clinic beginning in September. And if you want to register, you can go to a website, not only to register, but just to learn more about Colleen as well. And it's www.cmthepractice. So cmthepractice, all one word, .ca. And if you do have any direct questions for Colleen and are having a hard time getting in touch with her, feel free to send me an email at ericandersonyxc@gmail.com. Again, this conversation does not happen without you, Amy. So I can't thank you enough for these last two episodes. None of this happens. And I remember it was like 5 or 6 months ago, we met for breakfast on a Sunday morning at Hometown Diner, and we were like, how can we work together to do something? And I'm just so happy with how it turned out. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me involved. This is such an important topic, and a topic that so many of us come up against. And so I think it's really important to highlight what's here in Saskatoon and in Saskatchewan. And thank you for letting me learn from you. I've learned so much.
Oh, I don't know about that. There's lots of typos in the script and stuff like that. But this has been lots of fun. And I want people to, I want you to tell them where they can find, because as we established in the last episode, you're way too above ground. But I think that's such a wonderful thing. So I want people to know where they can find your voice out there.
Yeah, I am above ground, so it's pretty easy to find me. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook, Amy D Farm D. You can also go to my website. It's www.amydfarmd.com. You can find all about me there.
Yes, and be sure to check out Amy's Chai and Chats, which we talked about in the previous episode. And you're just very busy. Plus, we haven't even talked about this, but you have a son.
Mm-hmm.
Tell people about Max.
Yeah, so life after cancer kind of took a turn for me there. It's true that I had ovarian cancer and had one ovary removed, but I kept one ovary and had my miracle Max. So my son was born on St. Patty's Day, so very lucky little boy.
And he's great. I do have to say, he slept through the entire photo shoot, but he was adorable while doing it. So, yeah. Are you enjoying motherhood?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, it's definitely, you know, I had one other friend that's a cancer survivor say to me, like, how's motherhood going? And I said, you know what, it's easier than I thought it would be. And she said, you know, after cancer, I think a lot of things are.
That's very true. And I think that's a really wonderful thing to say. Yeah, but he's an amazing little guy. So, Amy, thank you for everything, and be sure to check out Amy's presence on social media and online as well. And I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thanks.
Maybe it will be a podcast.
No comment.
Okay.
Oh, you know what, Eric? Yes. I should mention something about Survivor if I can,
yes,
too.
Please do.
Yeah. So the Chai and Chat that you heard about is run by an organization that I started called Survive Her. So Survive Her with the HER at the end. And you can find more about that at surviveherfoundation.ca, or you can look us up on Facebook. If you're a female in Saskatoon or in Saskatchewan even fighting cancer, look us up, and it's nice to be with like-minded people when you're going through that.
Well, I bet. And so with the work that you're doing there, what can people find out?
Yeah, so there's 3 different avenues Survive Her takes. We fundraise to support research for finding detection, treatment for cancers that primarily impact women. So that's one stream. The second stream is our connection. So that's our Chai and Chat. So we aim to connect other female survivors in the city with one another. And the third avenue is resources. So you can go to our website, and coming up very shortly, there'll be kind of like a big pool of resources that you might find useful as you go through treatment.
That's so interesting. And from doing these 2 episodes, you realize that there is a very tight-knit community here in Saskatoon when it comes to cancer. So I just think the work that you're doing is awesome. So yeah.
Definitely, when I was first diagnosed, someone said, now you're part of this elite club that no one wants to be a part of, but you are part of a community.
So Amy, thank you again for everything. And I quickly want to thank a few more people before we go. Janelle Wallace, who's the podcast photographer. She took some incredible portraits for these episodes, and you can find her photos on our podcast Instagram page, on Twitter, and on Facebook as well. My cousin Andrew for all the music, to Corinne Larson and David Hutton from the CBC for all their help, to my wife Jen, not Fred. Fred's the dog, to Jen and Fred for all their love and support, and once again, Amy, to you as well. This interview was done on Treaty 6 territory, as well as their voicing and the traditional homeland of the Métis. Please subscribe to the podcast. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you find your favorite podcasts out there. And you can stream episodes on Spotify and on the website at yxcunderground.com. And if there's someone out there who you think should be on the podcast, who's doing something awesome in Saskatoon, but is flying under the radar, please let me know. You can send an email to ericanderson@gmail.com. The next episode, which is going to be the last episode for season 1, is going to feature this really great guy named Derek Chesney, and he's a constable for the Saskatoon Police Service, and that's going to drop next month, so hopefully you'll tune in for that. Thank you so much for listening and for all your support in these last 2 episodes, and we'll talk to you soon, Saskatoon.